Hello everyone, welcome to Aardvark Swift. I'm your host Michael Rodby. With me today is senior recruiter Dave Moss. We're talking to Matt Knott from Nequinox. He's the development director there. He's had a very interesting background which if you listen on you'll find out all about. Hello Matt, thank you for joining us.
Hi Michael, hi Dave.
So tell us a bit about what you do at the moment as a development director at Nequinox and how long you've been there, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I've been at Nequinox just over a year. I started on the 1st of July 2020, recruited through lockdown, which was interesting. I'm the development director, so my role is really to look after all of production. I am also heavily involved in business development and also recruitment side of the business. So in short, my role is to build the capability and capacity of the studio.
I bet that comes with a lot of interesting challenges and sort of roles and stuff.
The role comes with many hats. So I end up wearing quite a few different hats on a daily basis, from kind of a little bit, I hesitate saying HR, but basically discussing things with people that perhaps are more personal or specific to their particular position, right through to speaking to senior vice presidents of big AAA companies, which is great. I'm very comfortable speaking to anybody really. Day to day, I suppose I'm more involved in kind of the project work, maybe a bit of account management in there as well, with the people that we work with already. I build relationships across the studio. I make it a point to have a one-to-one meeting with everybody that joins. And that's nothing to do with work. That's to get to know them. It's hard to do right now because it's on Teams. So actually, one of my biggest challenges is to get people to kind of warm up a bit when they first start talking to me about what they do. I want to know about them and what floats their boat. If somebody's got a particular passion for frogs or something, I want to know about it because then I can. And if I know more about them, what you end up getting is you start to know somebody, you start to like them, and then you start to trust them. And that's what we want to build across the studios, a lot of trust. I think trust is a big word in the industry right now. And that's the way I get people to trust me, is by talking to them.
You mentioned that in that role, and just what you talked about then, is a lot of hats that you're having to wear. From a little bit of research that I did before we started this talk, you've must have picked up all these kind of skills from lots of different roles that you've had before. So would you mind telling us a little bit about your background and the sort of roles that you've worked previously?
I've got an eclectic career, I'd say. I'll start out with my education-wise. I've got 2 degrees. I've got one in fine art and one in architecture. So you have neither of those much help in games, I'd say. Actually, that's a complete lie. They are both really helpful. Both require you to be a self-starter. Both require you to be creative. Both degrees require a certain amount of imagination, and I think this role demands that. I actually had a short amount of time in TV. I worked for a post-production company down in London for a couple of years as a runner. So I think also if you've ever done a job like a runner, you have really been at the bottom of the pile. Yeah. So you know how hard it is when you're starting out. And I got promoted there. Unfortunately, lost a big contract with the BBC and ended up being made redundant. But luckily, I walked into a job at Technicolor Film Services. That was working on DVD when DVD was a thing. And so I worked on a whole bunch of DVD stuff for all the studios in America, all the Hollywood studios, as well as big bands and serious music labels. So I worked on some really cool products. So worked on a Depeche Mode live DVD, worked on a Moby DVD. I was a producer for all of the James Bond DVDs in Europe. So it was good back in the noughties, I suppose. It's kind of 15 years ago now when DVD was interesting. Now it's just streaming. So, again, I spent quite a long time there. I was there for about 6 years. And then I got recruited to join Hasbro, toy and game company, and that was amazing. Look back on that with such fond memories, and I'm even part of a LinkedIn group called the Has-Beens, which is a group of ex-Hasbro people, and we all still speak to each other, and they're amazing people that worked for Hasbro, and in fact it really opens doors working for Hasbro, or having worked for Hasbro, and it was a fantastic company to work for. I couldn't speak highly enough about it, and the people that I worked with were stunning as well. And then unfortunately I lost my job at the end of 2008, beginning of 2009 with the big financial crash, and that's when I decided to go back to university to study architecture. And then when I left, I decided I didn't really want to be an architect. It was a good exercise to do. I loved the work, but I started my own small design agency, and then it turned into an interactive design agency, an interactive production company, and I worked on toys. I worked on games. I created and kickstarted my own book card game with a colleague. I produced all of the interactive experiences for a museum in Antwerp, and 20 odd interactives for a museum in Kuwait. All really cool stuff, really kind of high end, very interactive stuff. Produced 35 audio games for an audio experience called Storyball, as well as doing kind of fairly traditional design things as well. So I'd done some brochure work and some branding and that kind of thing. So that was all lots and lots of fun. And my business was more focused on interactive by the end of it. I was working more and more on interactive experiences all over the UK and in fact across the world. So I've had quite an eclectic background until Steve and Ant approached me sort of May of last year and asked if I wanted to join Nequinox.
So was games ever an aspiration, Matt?
Always.
Or all right, is that just from you being a player, or?
I suppose I've always loved games since I had my Spectrum 16K.
Showing your age there, Matt.
Yes, with the rubber keys. So games has always been an ambition, and I think it completed a bit of a 5-card trick, having worked in TV, film, DVD, toys and games, physical games, and now into video games. It's almost like a 5-card trick there for any producer. I suppose my role really has been focused on production all the way through, even though I've done lots of design work for it as well.
Would you say that quite a few transferable skills came from each role when you've sort of funneled that into games? Video games specifically?
Yes, absolutely. I don't have a lot of the hang-ups that perhaps a lot of other video games people have, like who have grown up in video games. That said, I'm not as technically savvy as those people either, so it's a bit of pros and cons. They'll have a lot of currency on me if you're talking about technical, but actually I'm not limited by kind of my experience of games. I've got so many other product-based production philosophies, as well as digital design, all these different elements that have come into my career at some point I've been able to harness and bring into Nequinox, and actually they're very transferable. It's a lot of the same stuff really, scheduling, getting things organised, asking the right questions is really important. So I'd say it's really it's helped a lot in the last year to be able to count on that experience. Yeah, technical stuff, I'll pick that up along the way, because that's kind of how people learn about technical stuff. And also I've got really good backup in the team. They're very patient with me to explain to me what on earth they're talking about.
So with that being said, then, for someone looking to get into a similar role or any form of production role, particularly in video games, what kind of advice would you give to them, and what sort of skills would you say they need to focus on really honing in on to become something similar?
I think there are two main skills of mine: listening and asking the right question. And when I say asking the right question, any question that you don't ask that's in your head, that's probably the worst possible scenario, because the sooner you get that out, the sooner you can start to hone what you need to know, and you can start to ask a better question. So you have to start conversations sometimes which are uncomfortable, that you really don't know where you are, but you just need to get them started. Listening is important with that, because if you listen carefully enough, the questions will emerge. And that's, I think from a production point of view, that's massive. Skills and things, what's been helpful to me, I suppose, in the last 12 months is being able to count on some design skills that I've got. So if you've got a special power, like, I don't know, perhaps you're good at design, or perhaps you're good at spreadsheets or something, use it. Use every trick in the book.
Yeah, I think that's very valuable advice, and particularly about forming better questions to get to what you want to hone in on. I think that's very valuable to people as a skill. I'm sure that's sort of been picked up specifically from all these different roles that you've done in the past. But talking about those a little bit, do you have a particular career highlight or specific projects that you worked on that really stand out for you?
I've probably got a couple. I mentioned the Depeche Mode DVD. That was an amazing project, and I still speak to the people that I worked with on that project. And in fact, I spoke to one 2 days ago who's now working at EA. Again, people who were on that project were amazing, and we got to work with Anton Corbijn, who's quite a celebrated photographer, who's photographed all the biggest bands in the world. He did a lot of the creative direction on that project. And I suppose Hasbro, there were a couple of points when I was at Hasbro when it felt like, wow. And we worked on a CSI game. I ended up hanging out with the creator of CSI for a day, and also one of the producers of the show on that project. So that was. So
you said that when you started at Nequinox, it's been a goal for you for a while to work with games, or you've been a massive fan of games for a long while. You briefly touched upon how the owners of Nequinox approach you. How was that process transitioning into games, and what sort of was the selling point to move into it?
Yeah, so I think at the beginning, perhaps there were some ambitions that and values that I shared about how we'd want to build a company, and because I was probably the first major hire in terms of management, I had to feel like, and also I was about to close my business for them, so there were a lot of value alignments that needed to happen. We had four pretty solid discussions about it, so perhaps it wasn't necessarily our typical interview process. But we'd met probably a couple of years ago now. The guys had seen me present to a room of 70 odd people, business people, about my career, some of the things I'd done. I was doing some invention work at the time, and actually we just kept in touch over the course of a year and had a couple of conversations about possible projects and things like that. And obviously the skills that I've got are relatively transferable, and they've been really patient with me in being able to kind of get me up to speed in terms of the technical side of things. I think creatively I can probably hold my own, but in terms of technology that's involved in games, that's or video games I should say, that's a little bit more involved. But I feel like I've learnt a lot over the last 12 months. Like I say, people have been super patient. We've got some really cool people in the studio who are just as patient and share the same sort of collaborative outlook on working. So it's been great. I think where we were this time last year and I think where we are now, we've done amazing, really.
Yeah, well, we all look forward to seeing what comes of an Equinox, and looking forward to seeing some more of your work. But yeah, I think we'll wrap it up there, Matt. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's been very valuable listening to what you have to say and hearing about your career path and stuff, and I'm sure that will be helpful for people, particularly in production roles, looking to go into similar lines of work. And thank you to everyone listening today. If you have enjoyed it, please do check out all our other stuff, and if you have enjoyed listening to about Matt and Nequinox, please do listen to the podcast that we're doing with him as well. But until next time, I've been Michael Rodber with Dave Moss and of course Matt Knott from Nequinox. Cheers.